talk about being a consumer. And a consumer is someone who buys things, food, clothes, pays rent. So I'm wondering if I could start by asking you all what kinds of things you buy. Is that okay? Yeah? Okay. So just by a show of hands, who here buys their own food or food for their family? Who's the food buyer? Okay. How about the clothes that you wear? Who buys their own clothes? Okay.
Women.
Oh, not only. I'm seeing some men on this side. How about pays rent for the place that you live? Paying rent. Okay. Some people paying rent. Who has a cell phone? Okay. Of those of you who have a cell phone, who has a contract? A cell phone on a contract? Okay, a few. So everybody else is prepaid, right? How about shopping on the internet? Who shops on the internet? Okay, not so many. How about Facebook? Who uses Facebook? Okay. Why might we be consumers when we use Facebook? Facebook's free. How would we be consumers using Facebook? I'm thinking about the advertising that you see on the internet or that you see on Facebook, you know, and when we see advertising, and not only on the internet, we see it everywhere around us, right? What is it asking us? Do you want to buy this? Do you want to buy this, right? So you're continually making decisions that are consumer decisions, really. And we see advertising, what other places besides the internet? TV, absolutely. Billboards, absolutely. Magazines, newspapers.
Banners on the streets.
On the streets, periodicals, yeah. Bus, if you took the bus here, inside the bus, outside the bus. Yeah, we're pretty much surrounded by advertising. So it's good to be aware that we're being consumers when we're seeing that. Also, when we use government services, we don't pay for them at the time. For example, going to a doctor. But we do pay for them with our taxes, so we are consumers of healthcare services. The organization that I work for believes that when we are being consumers, we have some rights. I'm not going to go through all of them, but for example, we have the right to safety, to know that when we buy something, we use it properly according to the instructions. It's not going to harm us. It's not going to make us sick. We have the right to a safe and healthy environment, and to us that means the right to choose products that are not as harmful or less harmful to that environment, right? And what I'm doing here today, we have the right to information, to know enough about a product before we buy it so we can make a good choice. So I've been asked to talk about a number of things today. I'm going to just give you an idea of what I'm going to talk about and see if that's okay with you, all right? I'm going to start by talking about accounts at banks and credit unions and trust companies, choosing them and using them. I'm going to talk a bit about credit history, a type of credit called a payday loan, some things to do with shopping in the store and over the telephone. I want to talk a bit about how we protect ourselves as consumers and protect our personal information. And then I'm going to finish up by talking about how to find rental housing. Is that okay?
All right.
Okay, great. So, starting on talking about accounts, if you take a look at chapter 1, right on page 1 of your books, there's information on accounts, and you'll see that it's entitled banking. And we often use that term banking when we mean depositing money, cashing checks, paying bills, but there are other places that you can do those things besides a bank. So banks, credit unions, and trust companies are all places where you can open accounts, cash checks, pay bills, invest money. No matter which of those types of companies you choose, you will find that they have a large number of accounts for you to choose from. So how do you decide? So I always suggest to consumers, think about how you are going to use the account. Why are you opening it? If you are opening it to set aside money to earn interest, if that's your reason for opening it, then you want to think about a savings account. A savings account allows you to deposit money, cash checks, pay bills. You can't usually write checks to pay your bills with a savings account, but savings accounts are more likely to have you are more likely to be able to earn interest with a savings account. An interest, of course, is a fee that you are paid for your money. Sometimes a savings account will also have a minimum balance. So they will say, we would like you to keep a certain amount of money in this account at all times. If you go below that amount of money one month, you might either be charged a fee, or you might, some of the services that might otherwise be free, you might have to pay for them. When you earn interest, it's considered income. So you have to pay income tax on your income. Sometimes consumers will choose something called a tax-free savings account. In these accounts, you can deposit up to $5,500 a year. You can earn interest, and you don't pay income tax on that interest. So these are just a couple of the options that are available. There are a wide number of savings accounts available. But maybe that's not why you're opening the account. Maybe what you really want is to cash your checks, pay your bills, not have to worry about how much of a balance you're keeping in that account. Then you might want to consider some type of checking account. A checking account enables you to use all of the services of a savings account, but you can usually also get personalized checks so that you can pay your bills using checks or mail money. There is usually no interest in a checking account, but I always suggest that people ask because you never know. You may find, no matter which kind of account you choose, savings or checking, that you have to pay separately for each of the services that you use. So what do I mean by that? Well, for example, if you're withdrawing money at the automated teller machine or bank machine, sometimes we call it an ATM machine, many of the services you do there have a fee attached to them. So for example, withdrawing money, paying bills, there would be a fee for any of those, or there might be, depending on the type of account that you have. Paying your bills by phone or online. For writing a check, you may pay a fee for every check that you write. Anybody here shop in the store with their debit card? Yeah, okay, so I'm seeing some people. Very popular in Canada, using your debit card. You may pay a fee for every time you use your debit card, depending on the type of account that you have. You don't see it on your bill, but you see it when you get your bank statement or your credit union statement or at the end of the month. So these are all called transactions, and depending on the kind of account you have, you might pay for them separately. If you're going to have an account where you're going to use 2 transactions a month, you know, you're going to deposit money, maybe once you're going to take money out at the ATM machine, and maybe you're going to pay 1 bill. You're really not going to spend a lot in service charges. But if you're going to use the account to shop with your debit card in the store, if you're going to pay 5 or 6 bills a month, maybe you're going to write a few checks every month, now your service charges are starting to add up. And by the end of the month, you might find that you have a fairly large amount for service charges. So you might want to consider a service plan or an account that comes with a service plan, where you pay one amount every month and you buy a certain number of services. And the idea is that it's cheaper than paying for each service individually. It's important, however, to think about the size of the service plan you're buying. So if I'm using 20 services a month, I don't want to be paying for 50, because you pay that amount whether you use them or not, right? So that's something that you have to keep in mind. Again, thinking about how am I going to use the account. Another way to keep tabs on your service charges is to think about how you use this automated teller machine. So if I have a bank card, or if I have a card from RBC, let's say, bank, and I am wandering past the Assiniboine Credit Union, I can use that card at the Assiniboine Credit Union bank machine, at the ATM machine, to take money out. Say I want to take out $20 or $40. But if I don't have, depending on the kind of account I have, I might pay RBC $1.75, $1.50, $2. Every bank has a different fee. And then I might pay Assiniboine Credit Union $1.50, $1.75, $2. If you use one of those machines that says Laser Cash or Fast Cash, or a name that's not a bank name, then you might find you pay even more, $2.25 sometimes. I've seen as much as $2.50. So now it can be approaching $5 to take a $20 bill out of the machine. It starts to get pretty expensive, right? So one suggestion is that the least expensive way to use this machine is to use the one with the same name as your financial institution, the same name as you have on your card. That saves you the most. There is an excellent website where you can compare accounts. www.fcac.gc.ca. And I want to point out in the books on page 2, halfway down the page you see a different website, the moneytools.ca. That site address has changed. This is the same information, but at a different address. I would suggest you write this in because this is an amazing site. There is information about credit, there is information about budgeting, mortgages, investing, almost anything you can think of to do with finances. But the one we're going to talk about now is the cost of banking. If you click on the cost of banking, it asks you questions very much like the discussion we've had so far today. How are you planning to use this account? And then it'll ask you, what companies are you thinking of? Where are you thinking of opening the account? You click on the companies, and it tells you how much all of their accounts will cost if you use them the way you answer the questions. So it helps you to do your cost comparison between the banks, credit unions, and trust companies, but it also gives you a lot of other little details of information, like how much interest, the interest rate is currently on those accounts, or do they have a minimum balance, and what is it? You know, it gives you a lot of little background information. So it's a very good site, and I highly recommend it. Banks, trust companies, and larger credit unions in Manitoba are on this site. If you're looking for smaller credit unions, this might be a better site, www.creditunion.mb.ca. I think everyone knows that you can access your account by going to the bank in person, over the telephone, or on the internet. How many folks do their banking here on the internet? Anybody? I'm seeing a couple. Okay. It's becoming more and more popular. But here's where I want to raise some concerns about protecting your personal information. So what the experts suggest is that the best thing to do when you are putting personal information on the internet is to make sure you're on a secure site. And there's a couple of things you can do to look for that, and one of them has to do with the address. So usually the address is up at the top of the screen, HTTP. If it's a secure site, you should see the S. If you don't see the S, don't start entering your information. If the S disappears while you are entering your information, say you change screens or something, it disappears, stop, turn off your computer, and start again, because your personal information might be in danger. Another thing to look for is the gold padlock. This is not a perfect picture of a gold padlock, but it's the only one I could find. Usually you see it up near the top, or sometimes it's down at the bottom here. Depending on the type of device you have or the type of computer you have, you might not see it, depending on your browser. But if you see it at the beginning, before you start to enter your information, and it disappears, that is something to be concerned about. So turn off your computer again, start over, stop entering your information. Account statements. This is another reminder that I like to make about protecting your information. You receive statements either by mail, by email, or you can now get them online, depending on what your preference is. I really encourage consumers to check your account statement every month to make sure that you recognize every transaction on it. I know it's boring. I know nobody wants to save their receipts when they do things because it's kind of a pain in the neck, but it is very much worth it. For example, mistakes happen and you want to make sure that you catch those mistakes if there have been mistakes. And also sometimes this is how consumers find out that they have been a victim of theft. So it's very important to check and to contact your bank, credit union, or trust company if you see anything unusual. And this goes for credit card statements as well. and you would then contact your credit card company. Using a bank card, those of you who shop with your debit card, you are already doing this at the automated teller machine or to debit purchases in the store. Your PIN number, that personal identification number that you put into the card, is something that you should really keep a secret and to yourself. So, you know, you'll see all the signs on the machines where the little hand covering the buttons, right? And it seems a bit like we're, you know, kind of overly suspicious. But actually, it is a good safety measure, because there are folks who will, you know, criminals who will stand behind you and try to see what number you're punching in. So it's important to be cautious. And important to think about the difference between a debit card and a credit card. And just to quickly say, a debit card takes money out of your bank account. It's like a banking card. It is not credit. A credit card, when you use a credit card to buy something, you are borrowing the money and paying it back at a later time. Right? What is your credit history? Before we go on to talk about credit history, I just want to stop and see if anybody has any questions about accounts. Did I rattle through that too quickly? No questions? Okay. If there are, just put your hand up and stop me. Your credit history is really a record of how you have paid back credit in the past. Did you pay on time? Did you pay late? Did you not pay? It does not follow you from another country. So if you have not had the opportunity to have credit in Canada, then you may have very little information in your credit history, or you may have no information in your credit history. So those of you who have cell phones on a contract, those payments might be reported on your credit history, but you would not have a lot of information in there if you haven't actually had credit, right? Lenders use your credit history to decide how risky is it to lend you money or to give you credit. How likely are you to pay them back? That was the original purpose of the credit history. But in the last 10 to 15 years, other industries, other businesses have started to use your credit history to decide if they want to deal with you as a consumer, right? Or how they want to deal with you as a consumer. So for example, when you apply to rent a house or an apartment, you might be asked for your permission to see your credit history. And those of you who are renting, you may have already been asked that. I'm not sure. When you apply for a job, especially one where you might be handling money, you might be asked for your permission to see your credit history. If you decide to buy insurance, your credit history might determine how much you pay for that insurance. No one can actually see your credit history without your permission. Okay, you must give your consent before anyone can see your credit history. But sometimes we give consent without realizing it. Sometimes we sign a form, you know, it might be an application to rent an apartment or a house, and we don't read the whole thing, and somewhere in there it says, by signing this form, I give you permission to check my credit history. So it's always important to read what we sign. How can you see your own credit history? Well, there are two ways you can see it. Your credit report is a very detailed record of all of your payments, month by month, on any credit that you have. It also talks about things like your employment. And it'll say, for example, you know, Visa, January 2013, paid on time. February 2013, paid less than 30 days late. It's very specific, right? It's a very specific report. Your credit score, on the other hand, takes that information, uses a formula to kind of bring it into a 3-digit number. So everyone in Canada who has credit is somewhere on this line between 300 and 900, right? And everyone would have a 3-digit number between 300 and 900 if you have a credit history. There are two companies in Canada who collect this information, Equifax and Transunion, and you'll find their contact information on pages 92 and 94 at the back of your books. Both companies will give you your credit report. not the score, but the report, the detailed report, for free once a year if you let them send it to you by mail. If you want to get it on the internet, you can get it right away. It usually costs $15, $16, something like that, and your credit score you always pay for. But you can get your report free once a year from each company by mail. I suggest that it's important to know what is in your credit report, or it's important to know if you don't have a credit report in Canada, that this is something you should know, because people are going to ask for your permission to see it. So you want to know what they're seeing before they see it, right? And you may decide that you want to, if you don't have a lot of information there, that you want to build. So first thing to look at when you get a copy of your credit report, are there any mistakes? Does it say that you're unemployed and now you're working? Does it say that you owe money and you've paid it off? Or does it say that you owe money and you never owed that money? And perhaps this is an incident or a hint of identity theft, or there's been some kind of crime committed, or maybe it's just a mistake. All of those things should be corrected. And I suggest the best way to correct it is by writing a letter to both companies, Equifax and TransUnion, and sending it by registered mail. It's an interesting thing about credit that the only way to get credit is to have a fairly decent credit report, or that's the best way. But the only way to improve your credit report is to use credit. So how do you get that first bit of credit so that you can use it in a responsible manner and put good information on your report? So let's talk a little bit about that. One thing that I suggest, which will never show up on your credit history in any way, is to open an account at your bank, credit union, or trust company and use the resources that that company has to offer. So for example, you may be able to have a meeting with a credit manager or a credit advisor, and you might ask them for some advice on building your credit history. Definitely ask if they have a program to help newcomers get credit, because almost every financial institution has one now. Another thing you might try is applying for a very simple basic credit card and see if you get it. If you don't, they might offer you something called a secured credit card. A secured credit card means that you give the company a deposit, $500, $800. They set it aside in case you don't pay your bills. So now there's no risk to them, and they give you a credit card with that same amount as the maximum on the card, so a $500 or $800 card. And I suggest, if you do get a credit card like that, that you use it as a tool to build your credit history. You buy things on the card that you already have the money for. You've got the money in your pocket, but buy it instead on the card, go straight to the bank, credit union, or trust company and pay the whole thing off. That looks great on your credit history. Using your card on a monthly basis and paying the full balance before the due date looks really good on your credit history. And also, you don't pay any interest. So you have interest-free credit, which is a great thing. Now that doesn't mean it's free, because sometimes there's an annual fee or a transaction fee. It may not be free, but you just wouldn't be paying the interest. Another thing to consider, if you can't set money aside for a secured credit card, is to ask someone to co-sign your credit application. So that would mean they basically sign the application with you, saying that if you don't pay your bills, they will pay your bills. And that person obviously has to have a good credit history. Something to think about with the use of your credit card. Sometimes consumers feel that the most responsible thing they can do if they get a credit card is not to touch it. So now I have $500 of available credit, and I'm not going to use it. I'm not going to buy anything with it. I'm not going to touch it. And although that doesn't harm your credit in any way, it's not also improving it. What will improve your credit is to use it and pay it off. Use it and pay it off. That improves your credit score. I want to talk about a specific kind of credit that is offered not by a bank or a credit union or trust company, but by an alternative lender. Sometimes you'll hear them called payday lenders. Companies like Money Mart, Cash Store, Lending Tree, Mogo. You've probably seen some of these on your way to entry program. And they're sometimes called payday lenders because they offer a type of credit called a payday loan. And it's a small loan, less than $1,500, that you pay back in full, plus the interest, on your next payday. So you must have a job or regular income, and you should have an account. Doesn't have to be at a bank, could be at a credit union or a trust company, in order to get this type of loan. An alternative lender might ask you to check your credit history, for your permission to check your credit history, but they are unlikely to not give you the loan because of your credit history. I usually alert consumers that this type of loan can be very, very, very expensive. So when you get credit from a bank or a credit union or a trust company, you'll often see, say for example on a credit card, you might have a 21% interest rate, and it'll have the letters after it APR, annualized percentage rate. So that means if I borrow money and I owe it for a whole year, I will pay 21%. If I owe it for part of a year, I will pay a part of 21%. That 21% is like a yearly interest rate. In Manitoba, currently, the maximum that a payday lender, an alternative lender, can charge you for a payday loan is 17%. But what is missing? No APR. So if I borrow the money this week and my payday is next week, I pay the full 17%. So, you know, the Public Utilities Board has said if you were to convert this on a 2-week loan into an APR rate, it would be more than 400% APR. It's a very expensive type of credit, so it's important to keep that in mind. Alternative lenders also offer other products. They will cash checks for you. You can open accounts, you can get a line of credit. I always encourage consumers, as with every product, financial products are no different. Do your comparison shopping. Check and compare the prices of these products with other lenders and with your own financial institution, and ask questions about how these services work, because they may not be the same as the ones that you're thinking about from a bank or a credit union or a trust company, even if they might have the same name. So it's important to ask questions always and do your comparison shopping. Okay, I want to talk today a bit about return policies. In Manitoba, a store never has to return your money or even take back an item once you have bought it, unless it is damaged or defective. If it's damaged or defective, they have to replace it or repair it, but they don't have to give you your money back. Most Manitobans don't know that, however, because so many stores in this province have a voluntary return policy. Because it's a voluntary policy, every store is slightly different. Every policy is slightly different. So let's talk about some of the things that you might see. If the store says that they will give you a refund, that usually means that you can get cash back, or if you bought it on your debit card, it will be put back into your account using your debit card. You would need the receipt. You sometimes need the price tag or the packaging, especially if it was in styrofoam, right? If it's an electronic product, like a computer printer or something of that nature, you might be charged a restocking fee. So they might say, yes, we'll return your money, but we'll take less 10% or less 15%, right? Or they might say, no, we don't give you your money back at all, but we will exchange the item for another item in the store of the same price. Or we'll give you a credit note or a gift card for another day that you're shopping in the store, and you can, you know, buy something else in the store for that amount. Also, even when stores do have a return policy, there are sometimes some items that are just not returnable. So, you know, they might say, yes, you know, we have a return policy on everything in the store, but we never take back pierced earrings, underwear, bathing suits, you know, personal type items. Used cars are almost never returnable. I've never heard of a situation where they would take them back. If something says final sale, that means you cannot bring it back, right? That's usually what it means. How long is it been since you bought it? That is also another really important question. And I have seen some return policies, or some return periods as short as 3 days, and some as long as 3 months. So there's a really big range in Manitoba. And so what I encourage consumers is, when you are at the cash register, before you pay your money, say, what is the return policy on this specific item in this store? And could you write it on the back of the bill for me? And most of the time they will be very happy to do that. Some stores even have a stamp, and they'll just stamp the back of your bill with their return policy. And the only real rule about return policies is that once they state their policy on their website or somewhere in the store, they have to stick to it. But they don't have to offer to tell you about it unless you ask, right? They don't have to say to everyone at the cash register, this is our return policy. If you ask, of course, they will tell you, or they should tell you. And so I encourage consumers, ask. Because you never know if you may need to bring it back, or maybe you're buying it as a gift and the person you give it to might want to give it back. It's important to know ahead of time. Warranties and guarantees. Guarantees are usually, I kind of think of them more as advertising than anything else. So satisfaction guaranteed or your money refunded. What does that mean, right? Whose satisfaction? How do I prove that? Another one, we guarantee the lowest prices in town, right? Those kinds of promises are very hard to get the store to live up to. Maybe if you have them in writing, but they don't help consumers all that much. A warranty, on the other hand, especially a warranty from the manufacturer, is a very good thing. It's a written promise that the product you're buying will do what it's supposed to do for a certain period of time. It tells you how they will repair it if it doesn't. It tells you if there is some of it that you will have to pay, where you have to take the item. It gives you all of the information. This type of warranty offered by the manufacturer is usually included in the price of the product. You don't pay extra for it. It's part of buying the product. And sometimes you'll see it advertised right on the box or the packaging, 1 year warranty, 2 year warranty, right? There is another type of warranty that you might be offered when you're shopping, and this is one that is sold to you by the retailer, the company that's selling the product, not the company that made the product, right? And these warranties you pay extra for. Sometimes they're called extended warranties. And often they are offered on products that already have 1 year of warranty or 2 years of warranty, and they'll extend it to 3 years or 5 years or 4 years. These are often replacement warranties, so they're not repair, they just replace. And sometimes consumers think, I'll buy the extended warranty, and by that time my coffee pot will have fallen apart, and I will go and get a new one. But it doesn't always work that way. Consumer experts suggest that these warranties will often end before the natural lifetime of your product ends, or the expected, not natural, the expected lifetime of your product ends. And I guess the other thing to be cautious of is they can cost you as much as 30% of the cost of the item itself in addition. So they're not all that expensive, but some of them are. But sometimes they might be worth the money. So for example, if you're buying a used car and there's no more manufacturer warranty on the used car, if a dealership is prepared to offer you a 3-month or a 6-month extended warranty for a reasonable price, car repairs are expensive, that might be a good choice. So each one needs to be evaluated separately, but it's good to be cautious. There are many reputable companies that sell by telephone. This is how they sell. They don't have stores, some of them. This is the way they do their marketing. They phone people up and they ask them if they want to buy. And they are selling, good products. But what puts you at a bit of a disadvantage sometimes with those consumers, with those companies as a consumer, is that you're in your home, maybe you're relaxing watching TV, maybe you're thinking, yeah, we do need a new vacuum cleaner, but we haven't done our research. We haven't priced them out. We don't know what we want to pay for it. We don't know what features we want, right? We haven't really thought about it. And sometimes the telemarketers can be quite high pressure. You know, they can really try to keep you on the phone and try to get you to make a purchase. So you'll say, no, sorry, I'm not interested. And they might say, oh, but you know what? It's on sale today. It's 20% off. And then if you say, no, I'm still not really interested, and they go, oh, wait, my manager just said 50% off. Now it might be 50%, you know. So they will try to keep you, or, you know, you haven't heard how great this offer is. You know, you need to stay on the phone and hear how great the offer is. So there can be a lot of pressure involved in this. And I just encourage consumers, you know, if you want to hear more about the item, by all means stay on the phone and listen. But if you feel that you would like to hang up, it is not impolite after you have said no thank you once to just put the phone down, right? You've said no thank you and you're not interested, and it's okay to just put the phone down. You are in your own home. If you don't want to receive those kinds of calls, you can ask the caller to put you on the company's do not call list. All companies that sell by telephone are supposed to maintain that kind of list, and then they won't call you back anymore. And if you don't want any of those, or it's never any, if you don't want more of those companies to call you, if you want to cut down on the number of companies that call you at home, we have in Canada a national do not call list. So if you take a look at page 26, I believe it's page 26, in the right-hand sidebar, you will see the information for registering for the National Do Not Call list. And so that means that licensed telemarketers, for 3 years, they will not be putting you on their list unless you have dealt with them in some other way. So for example, you phoned them to buy a lens. So then they have 6 months to keep calling you back, right? Which is fine though, because you've chosen that company, right? So, you know, you feel comfortable buying from them. But anyways, that's how the National Do Not Call list works. Also, if you do buy something over the phone and you change your mind within the next, you have 10 business days to change your mind. In Manitoba, you can cancel your sale within 10 business days only if you make it over the phone or if they come to your door. That's the only time. It doesn't, if you go to the store and you buy something, that doesn't apply. This is only for door-to-door sales or for telemarketing when you make a purchase over the phone, right? Because you haven't had an opportunity to think about it ahead of time. That's the reason that rule is in place. Let's go back and look at what might be another possibility. This might be a very reputable company that's phoning you. You might decide you want to buy that product. This might not be a reputable company, and it's sad that this is the case, but when you answer the phone in your own home, you don't really know who's phoning you, do you? Even if you have call display, you do not know who's phoning you. So it could be someone phoning you trying to get your personal information. How do you know the difference? Well, you can't tell the difference. You cannot tell the difference. So what the RCMP and the police suggest is this. If someone phones you, and no matter for what reason, maybe they're surveying your opinion, maybe they're trying to sell you something, who knows, it doesn't matter the reason, but they are calling you, so you don't know for sure who they are. Do not give out any personal information over the phone, not even your first name, not your address. If they're dialing your number randomly, they don't know who they're calling, so don't tell them. Don't give that information. If you're interested in the product that they're selling, if it sounds good, if the price sounds good, ask for the name of the company, look them up on the internet, look them up in the phone book, and call them back. They will be happy to sell you the product if it's a reputable, valid company that's calling you. But if it isn't, you've saved your personal information from going out to someone who might try to misuse it, right? Another variation on this type of call is when someone calls you and says, we're calling from your bank, we're calling from your credit union. They don't name the credit union usually, and they say, you know, we've had a security breach and we just need you to verify your account number and your PIN. Yeah. Banks, credit unions, credit card companies, trust companies, they will never ask for your credit information when they phone you. If you phone them, that's different because they want to verify who you are. But if they phone you, they are not going to ask you for that information. So be wary of that kind of phone call. And there is another version of that that you might get by email. asking you to give, and it's a very similar thing. We've had a security breach. Just go on this link and verify your personal information, right? And it'll look like your credit union, bank, or trust company site. But it is very rare that, we have been told that banks and credit unions will never ask you for your information in that way. Only if you contact them will they ask you for that information. They know your account number. And this leads me to talk about the next topic, which is identity theft. We've already sort of started talking about it. Protecting your personal information has become very important over the last 10 years. And identity theft is a type of crime that is committed when someone steals your personal information and uses it to commit a crime. And I've heard, experts in this area say that information is the new money. Your personal information is now more valuable to a thief than taking the money out of your wallet. It's more important to take your cards, right? So what are we talking about? What do we mean when we say personal information? Passports, social insurance number, bank card, PIN number, credit card. These are all pieces of your personal information, as is your health card, your driver's license, or even just your name, address, and birth date. Those three pieces of information together apparently can be enough to potentially help enable someone to commit a crime, make it possible for someone to commit a crime. What kinds of crime can be committed? Well, you may lose money in the sense that, they may take money out of your bank account if they have your account number and they have your PIN. They might be able to remove money out of your bank account. They may have enough information to open a credit card in your name and charge up a lot of charges and not pay the bill. And so very often consumers don't even learn about this until they look at their credit history and find that they owe all this money that hasn't been paid. And it's not really their debt at all. It's someone else using their name. There are three kinds of consumers that are most often the target of this kind of crime. Senior citizens, youth, and newcomers to Canada. And so I like to talk about this at entry program, not to make people nervous, but just so that people are aware and so that they know that they have tools available you have tools available to protect yourself. So how could you do that? Well, one way is to pay attention to your mail. Does your mail look like it has been tampered with when it comes in? Does it look like somebody's tried to open it? And if it does, what is in that? Is it your bank statement? Is it your credit card statement? Is it something that you are concerned about? Before you throw anything out, before you get rid of your mail, utility bills, personal letters, anything that might have personal information, and bank and credit card statements, of course, it's a good idea to shred them, because there are folks who go through garbage and recycle bins, and they may be looking for recyclables, or they may be looking for your personal information. Protect your social insurance number. Your social insurance number is intended for Canada Revenue Agency for your income tax, right? That's the purpose of it. And so you have to give it sometimes. You have to give your social insurance number when you're hired for a new job, or when you apply for a bank or credit union or trust company account, because you might earn interest. If you're applying for a tax credit, you have to give your social insurance number. But you don't necessarily have to give your social insurance number as identification to cash a check in the store or something of that nature. So sometimes consumers are asked for their social insurance number in situations where they don't have to give it, but in situations where they want very much the product that the other person is selling. So it makes it a bit uncomfortable, and sometimes you, as a consumer, you have to decide what you want to do. If you decide that you want to give it, well, what are you afraid of? If you're working with a reputable company, you're not afraid that the company is going to misuse it, but they might have employees. So how will that information be protected? That's a question that you want to ask. Will it be locked in a filing cabinet, password protected on the computer? How are they going to protect your information? How long are they going to keep it? You know, for example, if you were asked when you rent an apartment for your, when you apply to rent an apartment, you might be asked for your social insurance number. Well, either you get the apartment or you don't, and then are they going to keep your social insurance number? And if they get rid of it, how will they destroy it? How will they make sure that no one else can get access to it when it's gone? Take a look on page, I want to say 73, but I'm not sure that's correct. No, it's 75. In the left-hand sidebar in your books, you'll see information about protection of your social insurance number. You'll see the contact information for the Privacy Commissioner of Canada, who regulates the protection of personal information. And you'll see those questions that I asked. And as Canadians, it's our right. As people living in Canada, it's our right to ask those questions. And it does two things. It gives you some confidence that your information is protected, but it also alerts the company to the fact that you're an informed consumer and they need to make sure that they are protecting your information as they should be, right? Using your debit card and credit card in the store. A lot of times now we use the chip, right? We have cards with a chip and we are able to put them in the machine ourselves. And so swiping the card doesn't happen as often anymore. But some old equipment still swipes a card. And if they are swiping your card, it's important to make sure that it only gets swiped once. And the other thing that I've heard the RCMP alert people about is what happens to the card between the time you hand it over and the time they swipe it through the machine and give it back to you. So someone who really is trying to steal your personal information might be able to swipe it under the counter through a scanner held in their hand, or swipe it in another machine under the counter. And so the RCMP suggests follow the card. Make sure you can see it all the time. Don't hand over your credit card and let them go to the cash desk with it. You follow them and go with it. Even if you're not using the chip, even if you're not putting in your PIN, make sure that your card is in your eyesight at all times. And that applies to your debit card as well. And if they do have to swipe it twice, you want to know why. It should say cancel transaction or transaction canceled. That should be the only reason to swipe it twice. Carrying your ID with you. This is another suggestion that I've heard the police and the RCMP make. If I'm not driving today, I don't necessarily need my driver's license. If I don't need my passport today, if I don't need my social insurance number today, it's probably safer at home. You know, research shows it's less likely to be stolen from your home than if you're carrying it on your person. And I think that includes both stolen and lost. Checking your bank statements. We already talked about this, and this is very often how consumers find out that they have been a victim of identity theft, because they see withdrawals or they see transactions on their bank or credit card statement that they don't recognize. They phone the bank or credit company or credit union or trust company and they check what's going on, and they find out, no, it's not a mistake. Someone has been trying to charge extra things onto their statements. One clue is if you see two charges from the same company in the same day, or two charges for the same amount on the same day, even if it's got two different company names, one right under the other. Another thing to do to protect yourself is to check your credit history every year. I mentioned that if someone tries to open credit cards in your name, or if they just try to get credit and all you see on there is the credit check, but you know you didn't authorize a credit check, that is a clue to you that somebody is trying to use your personal information. And so very often checking your credit history can be the thing that alerts you to the fact that you might be a victim. How can someone authorize a check on your credit history without your permission? Well, if they have some of your identification or your personal information, they can pretend to be you. That's how they can do it. So that's one way to find out. And I mentioned, remember, that you can get it free once a year from each company. So what some people suggest is stagger them. So get it from Equifax in January and TransUnion in June, so that you've got every 6 months you are able in some way to check your credit history. So what if you think you might be a victim of identity theft? Well, the first thing to do, and I think I've already said this, is check with your bank, your credit union, your trust company, your credit card company, anybody else you have credit from, and find out if it's a mistake. Because it's always possible that a mistake has been made, and if it's a mistake, it can get corrected. If it's not a mistake, or if you know for sure your wallet's been stolen, your purse has been stolen, call the Winnipeg Police. 204-986-6222. They are also at the back of the book. The non-emergency number, right? They're on the page 94 at the back of your books. Call the non-emergency number, the Winnipeg Police. They will give you great advice on what you need to do. They will probably tell you. The next thing is to contact your financial institution, your bank, your credit union, your trust company, your credit card company, or anywhere else where you have credit. And another place to call, and this is the hardest couple of calls to make, but it's very valuable, is Equifax and Transunion. These are the two companies that maintain credit information. And what they will do, if you have been, or you think you have been, a victim of identity theft, or even if you've lost your identification and you're not sure what's happened to it, they will put a watch on your account and on your social insurance number for up to 3 years. There is a cost for this. They charge about $5 each to do it. And it's the hardest thing to do because you have to do it through the automated voice telephone system, right? So it's a pain in the neck. And I had to do this a few months ago. I lost my laptop and I had personal information on it, so I wanted to sign up for this with both companies. And my apartment is A, like the letter A, but the machine was hearing 8. And so I was having a huge back and forth with this telephone machine trying to get it sorted out. So it is a bit of a pain in the neck. But once it's done, you know that anytime somebody tries to check your credit history, somebody tries to open new credit, they will phone you and say, was this you? Did you authorize this, or is this somebody else? They keep, and you know that for 3 years you have that security. So it is worth it. It's worth the time and the effort, is what I'm trying to say. Don't be scared off by the method. Stick with it, because it's definitely worth it. And the other thing that all the experts suggest is, even if you know you lost your ID, even if you know it's not stolen, even if you saw that you dropped it down the sewer vent or whatever, still report it lost or stolen. Still report it lost in that instance, because you never know who might pick it up out of there. And if you've lost it and you don't know where you've lost it, you never know who might find it and decide to use it. So it's always just a good policy to report it lost or stolen, and if you can replace it, replace it. That is always a good policy. There are a number of different ways that you can find out what places are available for rent. And one of the ones that is very interesting is called the Renter's Guide. They have them here at entry program, usually in the lobby. But you can also get them free at a number of places: corner stores, drug stores, convenience stores. They're usually in a little stand. They show you places available for rent in Winnipeg by neighborhood, and that's one of the really good things about them. So you can think about, where do I want to live? What part of the city do I want to live in? Oh, thank you. And then you can see the places that are available in that particular neighborhood. One of the things that's not so good about the Renter's Guide is it's printed far in advance, and there's a lot of competition for rental spaces in Winnipeg right now. So a more up-to-date source of places available are the daily newspapers, the Winnipeg Free Press and the Winnipeg Sun. A lot of times the ads in those publications or in those papers, they use shortened words, abbreviations, to save money. It makes them really hard to read. So on page 54 and 55 in your book, there is, in the sidebar, there are explanations for some of those abbreviations, just to make them a little easier to read. Of course, one of the most up-to-date sources is going to be the internet, right? www.rentcanada.com. This is a website. I don't believe that it's in the book, but it is a website that allows you to get the web addresses for the property managers in the city that you're interested in. So for example, you want the websites for all the property managers in Winnipeg so that you can be checking them for places that are available and that you're interested in. Sometimes on the website you can actually apply for an apartment or a house. Sometimes on the website you can put yourself on a list to be notified when a space comes available in certain buildings. So the websites can be very good to have, the websites of the property managers. There are other sites that sometimes people use to find places available for rent. One example is Kijiji, but there are others. And a lot of times people do rent houses or apartments using those sites. But I caution consumers, sometimes, again, those who wish to take advantage of us as consumers use these sites as an opportunity to get money out of you without providing anything. So what do I mean? Well, I've heard stories of people sending in a deposit for an apartment or a house and only to find that it was never for rent in the first place. It's somebody else's house and they own it. But it's really easy to put up pictures on Kijiji, right? All you need to do is steal a few pictures from your phone when you're in the house and post them up on Kijiji, and you're able to do that. So the tip is always look at the place first. Go down and see it, especially if you're in the same city. Why would you not go down and see it before you send money? That's always a safety feature. If you find a place or a couple places that you're interested in, I recommend making an appointment as quickly as possible because there is competition for spaces. And what are some of the questions? Be prepared to ask all your questions at this appointment. So what are some of the things you want to ask? Well, of course you're going to ask how much the rent is each month. You might also want to ask when the rent has to be paid, because if you are even one day late in Manitoba, they can charge you $10 and another $2 for every day after that. Important question, what is included in that rent amount? So sometimes the water is included, sometimes the electricity is included, sometimes parking is included, or television. The big question is the heat. What is the heat source? Like, what kind of heat do we have? Is it gas? Is it electric? Is it a boiler? And is that included in the rent, or do I have to pay for it separately? Because if you have to pay for it separately, that can add quite a bit to the cost of your shelter for the month, right? So you have to know that. I suggest ask, what is the average monthly cost of heat for this space, or what is the average winter monthly cost of heat? Because that's when you're really going to pay. Another important question, how will I rent this space? Will I lease it or will I rent it month to month? So if you have a lease, that's a legal document that you sign, promising you will pay a certain amount of rent every month for a certain number of months. If you decide to move before those number of months are over, you are still responsible for that rent. So what a lot of consumers do is they find someone else to take on the lease. And we sometimes call that sublet, or another word that I've seen used, or another phrase, is lease assignment. Now, you don't have to find this person on your own. The landlord or the caretaker will help you do this, but also this person has to be approved by the landlord just the way you have to be approved before you rent, right? Same process. If you rent month to month, you have no obligation to stay for a certain period of time. But even if you don't have a lease, the landlord cannot raise your rent more than once a year, and they cannot raise it more than the provincial guideline for that particular year. So I believe this year it is 1%, but it changes. And occasionally, if some large or major improvements or renovations are made on an apartment building or a house, the landlord will ask for a higher rent increase to cover that cost. They make a special application, the government notifies you as a tenant, and you have the opportunity to comment on that application. So there is pretty good, system for keeping an eye on how much rent goes up. Other questions you might want to ask. Another important one, how much notice do I have to give before I move out? That means how long ahead of time do I have to let you know, especially if you rent month to month. If you don't give it a sufficient, for example, if I plan to move at the end of February and I let them know in the middle of February, they might say, gee, we don't have time to rent it for next month, so we're going to charge you for another month, right? And they would be within their rights to say that if they said, I want 1 month's notice, right? They let you know ahead of time how much. And you might ask that question at the interview. And another thing to ask if I sign a lease, how far in advance do I have to let you know that I plan to stay? I want to renew my lease. How many months in advance before the end of my lease? Just so that you can plan for what you're doing. If you choose an apartment that you want to move into, you will have to fill out an application form. At this time, they might ask you for references, the names and addresses of other people that you had rented from. If you don't have references, ask if you can offer something else. You know, you may not have had an opportunity to rent in Canada yet, so you might not be able to provide a reference. But can you offer something else? Can you offer a letter from your employer to say that you have income? Or a letter from an instructor, I'm in a course to get a certain kind of job, right? Is there something else that you can offer? They may also ask to see your credit history. And if you do not have a lot of information in your credit history, and if you do not have references, they might ask you for other things. Your social insurance number, for example, and you may have to make a decision whether or not you want to give that information. You will be asked for a security deposit. A security deposit is usually 1/2 of the first month's rent. So you have to assume the first month, 1.5 times the rent. The security deposit is set aside in case there's damage created by you or people visiting you while you are renting the house or apartment, right? That's the purpose of it. But sometimes if you don't have much information in your credit history, if you don't have references, a landlord might say, can you give me 3 months security deposit, or 2 months or 6 months ahead of time, right? If you choose, you don't have to do that. The rule is usually 1/2 of the first month's rent. But if you choose to do it, make sure you get a receipt that talks about why you gave the money, how much you gave, what date you gave it on, so that when you leave, you are able to get that back. You are supposed to get your security deposit back if you keep your house or apartment in the same shape that it was in when you got there. And if you are the successful applicant, if you get the house or apartment, you might be asked to sign a lease. And this is probably one of the most important things I'm going to say today. A lease will be long and it won't be easy to read, but I encourage you to understand and read as much as you can of every word in that lease. And if you think you won't be able to read the whole thing, have someone come with you and explain it. Let them go over it with you word by word, line by line. You are entitled to understand before you sign. That is your right as a consumer. And really, when you sign something, you are saying, I agree with it and I understand it, because you can't agree with something if you don't understand what it means, right? We get calls at our info center all the time from consumers who say, you know, I didn't know what I was signing. But that is so hard to prove after the fact. This is the moment to find out what that lease says before you sign on the dotted line. The Neighborhood Immigrant Settlement Workers, am I saying that correctly? They are an organization that might help you with that, that might be prepared to go over the lease with you. Another organization would be New Journeys, and I'll talk a bit more about New Journeys in a minute. Another thing to do before you sign, make sure you see the actual place you're going to live in. Sometimes when you're looking for apartments, they'll say, oh, this one right by the office is exactly the same as that one on the 10th floor. We'll just look at this one, you know. But before you sign a lease, you want to see that one on the 10th floor, and you want to make sure that you're comfortable with the actual spot. So now it's moving day. You have your new place, you've got the keys. Before you move any boxes or any furniture in, go through the apartment or the house with the landlord or the caretaker and make a condition report. Make sure that you note any repairs that you see, any damage that you see. If there's a stain on the floor, a spot on the wall, a hole in the ceiling, cracked window pane, leaking faucet, like just anything, make sure it goes down on the condition report. If there is furniture being rented in the space, a lot of consumers will snap photos of it and attach those pictures to the condition report. Why is that so important? Because this is what helps you to get back that security deposit. If the place looks the same when you move out as it did when you move in, you should be able to get back your full security deposit. Sometimes, you know, if there's a stain on the carpet, it's hard to prove that it was actually there when you moved in. So that's why you need the condition report. And a picture is even better, or in addition to, let's say, having it written down, right? Also, good idea to find out who you need to call in an emergency, especially if you live in a place where there's no on-site caretaker. There's no caretaker living there. It's not like you can just call any plumber if a pipe bursts in the middle of the night, right? You have to know who you can call. If you think you might need help finding rental housing, New Journeys Housing is a nonprofit organization set up specifically to help newcomers, you know, get themselves into housing. And they run an excellent course for new tenants, for you to learn your rights and responsibilities as tenants. They give you a certificate, and I have heard that some landlords will accept that certificate in lieu of references sometimes, because it shows that you have some knowledge about your responsibilities as a tenant. They can help you with a whole host of things. This is an excellent organization to check out. Their contact information is on page 93 at the back of your books. If you think you might have trouble paying your rent, there are a number of organizations that can help you. Manitoba Housing is one of them, and their contact information also on page 93. And if you have any problems with your landlord, getting repairs done, not understanding your lease, not able to get your damage deposit back, the place to call is the Residential Tenancies Branch. They are the government office that deals with rules and legislation protecting both landlords and tenants, right? So you have to keep in mind, they're not advocates. They are explaining to you the rules and making sure the rules are accessible to you. So they will mediate between you and the landlord if necessary. They offer a whole bunch of services, and they're very helpful folks. Their information is on page 94. We're at number 17, 222 Osborne Street South. Phone number stays the same. This is our new email address. So jot it down. Please call us. Our volunteers are just waiting to help you find information, help you solve problems, find out which agency can help you best. Please come down and visit us. And thank you so much for your questions, for your participation, for your good ideas, and for your attention today. Thanks very much.